It's time for the Daily Stand Up Podcast presented by Agile Dad with your host, Lee Henson. Without any further ado, let's get started. Today, I wanted to talk to you about 5 keys to keep your daily Scrum on track. Now, I do a lot of conversation around the daily Scrum, especially in my certification classes, because I recognize that it's one of the most important events that happen where Scrum teams can communicate exactly what's going on so that we can get our head around what commitments are being met, what commitments are outstanding that aren't being met. It's just a great opportunity for us to have good discussion surrounding what we potentially can and can't do. So let's start with this list of the top 5. So coming in right at the top is time box. So we all know that the most critical piece of this is to keep it to 15 minutes or less a day. However, I add another caveat. I always tell my teams it should be 30 seconds per person, not to exceed 15 minutes. Now, that definitely puts a damper on teams who like to be long winded, but what I can tell you is 30 seconds per person is a long time if you don't have someone there asking you the questions. So I think the key here is instead of having a scrum master or a team member who facilitates by saying, let's start with Joe. Joe, tell us, what did you do yesterday? If you start and say, let's get started, and have someone say, I'll start, i.e., Joe, Joe could say, yesterday I committed to do these things and I completed them. Today, this is what I commit to do. And it really is easy to keep it within that 30-second time box. So I usually say 30 seconds per person, not to exceed 15 minutes. Easy enough. Coming in at number 2, if you want this meeting to be successful, you should probably hold it daily. That's why it's called a daily Scrum. Now, there is one exception. On the meeting day, you don't necessarily have to meet because that's kind of silly, to say I commit to going to all my meetings as required. It doesn't make sense for you to hold a daily stand up on a planning day. Okay. Coming in at number 3. These are kind of captain obvious, but I wanted to make sure I covered them. It's called a scrum or stand up for a reason. I have so many people complain about stand. Oh, do we have to stand? What if we're remote? Do we still have to stand? My answer is always yes. But I'm like, I had a second thought about it. And I said, you don't have to stand. I'll give you an option. We can either stand or we can all do plank. And when I gave them that option, standing won unanimously. It was kind of fun. But many people ask why. And I think part of it, you hear people say, oh, it needs to be uncomfortable. That's not why. Standing helps keep the meeting brief and it helps everyone focus. It gets your blood flowing better and it really does help people to understand and pay closer attention to what's going on around them so that they can be in a learning stance. I guess the easiest way for me to explain it. That's why it's called a stand-up meeting. All right, number 4. Let's make sure we stick to 3 questions. Now, the 3 questions that everyone always says, what did you do yesterday? What are you doing today? Do you have any impediments? While those have been the quote unquote standardized questions, what we found is that those aren't in line with the original structure of what Ken taught in some of the early Scrum classes. Now, I took my Scrum class from Ken Schwaber. It was one of the very earliest ones back in the 2003 timeframe. And what I can tell you is he mentioned over and over that this meeting was more about accountability than it was status, which I thought was really interesting. And it goes something like, what did you do yesterday with regard to your accountabilities? Did you complete the things that you said you were going to do? Which I thought was really interesting because if you think about it from that perspective, someone can come in today and say, oh, yesterday I did these 3 things. But were those 3 things the 3 things that you originally agreed to do? And I think that when you put it into that perspective, it makes a lot more sense to say, yesterday I said I was going to do these 3 things, and I did. It just makes it easier for you to stick with what you're trying to do. The second question, instead of what am I going to do today, should be focused on what do I commit to do today? This way, it's a commitment between you and the team. And once again, I want to remind you, nobody's asking you these questions. These are questions that you're just answering based on the knowledge that you have from the prior day. And then the third question, this is where it gets interesting. A lot of people say, are there any impediments or obstacles that are blocking you from making progress? That is a good question. Don't get me wrong. But I think a better question, here we go. A better question would be, if you have an obstacle or impediment, is there any reason why you waited till now to tell us about it? Sometimes what I find amazing is that people know this question is part of the meeting, They'll wait until the next day to tell you about something that they could have told you yesterday. So I like twisting this one around and saying, hey, if you had an obstacle or impediment, tell us immediately. If not, why did you wait until now to tell us about it? And sometimes there's a good reason. I waited till today to mention it because I wanted everyone on the team to give me a recommendation of what we could do. Or I waited till today to mention it because I just learned it, 10 minutes before the beginning of this meeting. What I'm trying to say is sometimes there is a good reason to delay calling out impediments or obstacles, but most of the time we should try to get those in right away. And then, of course, the fifth and what I consider the most important tip to making this the best it can be is to focus on collaboration. My good friend Robbie Van Winkle, aka Vanilla Ice, once said we should all stop, collaborate, and listen. This meeting is designed to encourage collaboration and communication within the team. Team members are encouraged to ask questions or offer help. I know that a lot of people say, "Oh no, you can't." If you try to speak, if someone's quick to say, "Let's take this offline." Let me tell you how much I hate "Let's take this offline." I don't think many people who say that realize what they say when they do. When someone says, let's take this offline, in essence, what did they just do? They just created another meeting. And what is the number one thing people hate about Agile? Too many meetings. So if you can avoid saying, let's take this offline, if you can get to the point where you're really focused on the communication and collaboration aspect of this, and let the teams hash things out for 30 seconds. Once again, if you don't interrupt, 30 seconds is a long time. In fact, I challenge you to try to talk about a topic that you're familiar with. Maybe do it right now when this podcast episode is over. Set a timer, talk about something for 30 seconds that you're passionate about without stopping, and see just how long 30 seconds is. What I'm trying to say is 30 seconds is a really long time. And I think many people just don't realize that. So take that into consideration when you're planning. So one more time, keep the meeting time box 30 seconds per person, not to exceed 15 minutes. Make sure you're holding the meeting daily except for planning day. Make sure people are standing or in plank, not so that they're uncomfortable, but so that they can stay focused. Remember the three questions. They're so critical and so important, and focus on collaboration. If you can do those things, it's really going to help this meeting be the best it can be and be a pillar for all of your other meetings that you're going to have in the future. That's going to do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed learning more about the Daily Scrum. If you have a topic you want us to cover, learn more at agiledad.com. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks to our subscriber who recommended this one. And as always, we encourage you to stay healthy, stay well, and stay agile, my friends. Until next time, do take care.